Hey everybody, what's going on? Josh here with Scrapyard Films, and today I got another awesome tutorial for you. In this one, I'm going to be going over the best chroma keying plugin you can have for Vegas that exists in this world. It's made by Boris FX and it's called Primatte Studio, and it comes included in every purchase of Vegas Pro and Vegas Post. Normally this plugin by itself costs $300, so it is a fantastic deal to be included in this. Now for this tutorial, I recorded some footage of myself, but I did some things wrong on purpose. First thing is, I'm standing pretty close to the green screen and you see that there's a shadow casting onto the green screen, causing basically a color shift in the darkness of the green. Next, I'm actually wearing green on my shirt, so if I key this green out, it's going to want to key this green on my shirt out as well. Third thing is, I recorded in pretty low quality. I made sure it was in 1080p in a 420 chroma subsampling, also at an 8-bit video. So it's, pretty pixelated. If you zoom in, you can see that it's pretty low quality all around my body, creating a lot of pixelation around me. Next, I have a key light shooting at me and it's really bright on the right-hand side and dark on the left-hand side, so it's an uneven background. And that includes a light above my head I left on purpose, which will provide 3 different shades of green on this background right here as well. And last thing is, I made sure to move around a lot to provide motion blur that's going to be very hard to key out in green screens, as people know. So we're going to work with Primatte Studio to tackle all of this. So first thing we're going to do is go over here, and instead of finding Primatte Studio, which I have it right here, and then dragging it onto my clip, we're not going to do that because what we're going to do is enable Primatte Studio as a composite layer, because the reason we want to do that is if we add it as a composite layer, anything we put on the background can actually be implemented into this Chroma Key plugin, like backgrounds or solid colors or things like that. If you just add the plugin onto the clip, it's not going to recognize that there are any other layers that it can work with to make some of its features work properly. So if we go over to the 3 dots on the left-hand side of the track, and we go to compositing mode, normally it's on source alpha, but we're going to go to custom composite mode. That's going to load up all the plugins that can be used as custom composite modes. And we're going to go down here and find BCC Primatte Studio and double click it. Once done, it loads it up right here and we see we have a ton of options. I'm going to go over these real quick. First button, we have a license that shows you all your licensing information. Next, we see FX Browser, and if we select that, it loads up a new window with all the presets built in for this plugin. And right now, all we have is default blue and green. So we're gonna close that. And then we have a Preferences button, and if we load that up, it tells us the preferences of this. It says we are enabling OpenCL, so we do have GPU acceleration enabled. And if we wanted to load Pixel Chooser with Mocha and preset, we could do that as well. And then you could choose what type of logging you want, normal or comprehensive. Now under here, we have a drop down for Quick Select Presets. And this will load the effects inside of our effects browser without having to load that window. Now over on the left hand side we have compare. We drop that down. This is basically a mode which lets us compare what we've done to what the original is. You can do a side-by-side comparison, move things around, move the right one around, to make it look good. So I'm gonna turn that off for now, and then I'm gonna collapse it. Under that we have the View Matte button, and when we select this, it converts our video to black and white. The black is what's gonna be completely keyed out, and the white is gonna be what's staying. But we haven't selected anything yet, so it's all white right now. Then we have view options. If we drop this down, we have a lot of different view options, and a lot of them are actually proprietary for certain things. So we'll probably never use any of these other ones unless we're doing some crazy fine tuning. I haven't encountered that yet, so I haven't used any of these bottom ones. The main ones we're going to be using are Final Composite, Matte Status, and Final Matte. Those top 3 are used the most often, but I'd say the main one we're going to be using today is Final Matte, which again will tell us which pixels are going to be keyed out and which ones are going to stay in the shot. So we're going to make sure to go back to Final Composite. Auto Analyze, one of the most important buttons we have on here. This is the first thing you're going to select, and it's going to automatically do its best to key everything for you right there with one click. Sampling shape, this is the shape of the selection that when we choose our green, it's going to be choosing in this shape or area. So it's 50 pixels by 50 pixels. If we drop it down, we can do a 5 pixel by 5 pixel range if we want to have a smaller selection, or if we want to do one single pixel, we can do point. These are going to be very useful here in a second, and I'll show you why. Sampling mode, we have a bunch of different options right here, but the only 2 that we're going to be using are clean BG noise and clean FG noise, which is clean background noise and foreground noise. Clean background noise means we're going to be telling Primatte what green we want to remove. And clean foreground noise, we're going to be telling Primatte what green we want to keep. So in combination with these 2 things, we can get a really nice key going on. So one of the coolest things about Primatte Studio is that you can select multiple samples of green. You're not just limited to one green which a lot of the other keyers are. You can take multiple samples of this green, this green, this green, this green, this green, all over and take them, and Primatte will store them in its memory and use those as your key. That's straight up amazing. So let's move on down here. We have a sample point, which is our point right here. We can click on the screen and drag it around, as you can see, or we can drop this menu down and manually drag it right over here. I'm gonna collapse it again. We're not gonna worry about any of the grayed out things right now because they're proprietary and we don't need to use them. Then we have adjust light on down here. Basically, if we're working with a multicolored green screen like this, if we have too much light on one side, it's gonna do its best to even out the darkness and the lightness of your background that it detects. We'll try that out here in a bit too. And then we have spill, which provides some basic spill corrections for quick keying that looks pretty good. Then we have secondary spill remover, which is basically magic, and it automatically clicks up and converts any overspill of green around the edge of your subject and the entirety of the subject. Matte refinement allows for adjustments to the edge of the subject that you're keying based upon the matte that you've selected. Edge cleaner allows for smoothing and blending of harsh and pixelated edges. Outside mask allows you to mask out what you don't want in this entire shot. You can make a custom square, or you can draw the shape in Mocha. We'll talk more about that here in a second. Inside mask is the opposite of outside mask. You can basically mask out what you want to keep and not be affected by the matte that you've selected. Again, you can draw a shape or mask and track inside Mocha. Scrolling down here more, we have color correction, which allows some basic color correction for your subject if you want to try to make it match the background a little better. It's not too advanced, it's just a little bit basic. Then we have light wrap edge, which basically deals with the fine edge of the subject that you've keyed out. It allows to add custom color, lightness, or even background images to wrap around your subject to make it look more like it belongs in the background that you're keying it onto. Light wrap spill is basically a little bit more than light wrap edge. It allows you to adjust lightness, colors, or even background images and presence from your background more over your subject than the edge specifically. Edge color correction allows you to do some finer edge correction to blend it in, make your edge look a lot better. And then advanced down here, we drop that down. It actually has a bunch of legacy options that they used to use back in the day, and they kept them in there just in case somebody wants to use them, but we'll never be using them because they're pretty much old and outdated compared to all this newer stuff you can use up here. So now that I've explained everything, let's go ahead and finally get started. So the first thing we're always gonna do is hit auto analyze. So I'm gonna select that, and it's automatically gonna key out the background and do its best to key out what it thinks I want, which it did a pretty good job. So I'm gonna go over to Final Composite, I'm gonna drop that down, and we're gonna go to Final Matte. And now we're gonna see what's keyed out and what stayed in. All the black is completely out. All the white is completely in. And then we have a bunch of gray in between. Next, I wanna select Adjust Light. And we can see if we turn it on and off that it is definitely making some good adjustments to this green and this mismatched power of light I have on the right-hand side compared to the left. So I'm gonna go over to my Final Matte and go to Final Composite, and we're gonna see, turn it on and off. And we can see that it's doing a pretty good job of blending this in. We can even adjust the strength if we wanted, or adjust it back. But we don't wanna go too high with this. So I'm thinking, 20 looks pretty good for me right there. Let's go back to the view options and go to Final Matte, and it's looking pretty good to start off with. Next, we're gonna start taking samples. So I'm gonna keep my sample shape pretty big right now for my broad selections, and then I'm gonna go down to the drop down and choose clean background noise. So I'm gonna drag this little point around and choose the background that I wanna key out. So I'm gonna say right here the top left is still pretty gray in this little area we can see. I'm gonna hit take sample. And we can see it just took the sample and added that to its memory of what green it wants to key out. Next, I'm gonna switch this to clean foreground noise. And what I like to do is basically go back and forth between background and foreground. Background, foreground, background, foreground, just like that. Because I found that that gives me the best results. So I'm gonna go to my blue shirt right here, and I'm going to take a sample. And now I'm just gonna go back and forth to background noise and foreground noise. And now that I got my broad selections out of the way, I'm gonna switch my sampling rate down to 5x5 pixels so I can get a little bit more fine tuned right here. And then sometimes you'll just run out of things to go back and forth, so you can click some foreground noise a few times in a row and then background noise a few times in a row if you wanted. And so that looks pretty good to me. The cool thing about Primatte Studio is you don't actually have to be absolutely perfect, because a lot of these features will fix the little mistakes and errors that come up with low quality shots and things like that. So I'm gonna go over to my view options and look at the final composite. And what I'm thinking is happening around the corner right here is that the auto adjust strength is messing with me a little bit. So I'm gonna turn that off, and we can see it looks a lot better. So I'm gonna keep adjust light off and then go for some manual picking and choosing right here. And I think I'm done for right now. So I'm gonna go back to my final matte and do my final composite. And we can see that I'm pretty keyed out. It may be a little rough around the edges, but that's okay. So moving down to spill, I'm gonna drop this down, and by default it has spill replace mode with complement. I'm actually gonna turn that to none. We can go through the options right here. We scroll down to solid color. We can choose a solid color. We can go down to soften background and none. I'm gonna keep mine on none because you need it on none to use some of these cool features down here in light wrap. But if you want just a quick key, you can choose the spill and choose maybe soften background or complement. Either of those two will do a really good job with the background you're using for a basic key. So I'm gonna collapse spill and go down to secondary spill remover. And when I select this one and enable it, it's gonna automatically take away what remaining green it detects, and to make my skin and everything look more natural, like I wasn't even in front of a green screen. Let me show you an example of how that's cool. If I go out here to where I'm moving my hand back and forth to where I have motion blur, it's doing a really good job of taking away the green in between that motion blur. So if I turn it off, we can see we have green in between here. We turn it on, that green is gone. Let me show you what this looks like with a background real quick. So I'm gonna drag and drop a background real fast. And now that I got a background, we can actually see what's going on a little bit better with this keying. So with secondary spill remover, we turn it off. We see a lot of green on the outline and edges, and we turn it on. We see that the green is gone, which is awesome. You can fine tune some of the settings here, but generally you really won't have to do too much. We're gonna come back to this a little bit later because of the green pickle that I have on my shirt. That's gonna be affected by this secondary spill remover, so we're gonna have to make some adjustments here. But I'll collapse this for now and go down to matte refinement. I like to do matte refinement a little bit later after I've done some of these settings already, as more of like a final treatment. So I'm gonna collapse that and come back to it. With edge cleaner, I'm gonna enable it. And we're gonna see that all that pixelation kind of gets blended in together and it starts looking a little bit better right there. So I'm gonna drop edge cleaner down, and then we could choose the cleaning radius, which if we increase that, you can see it blends in a lot better too. It's more like an opacity or fade in and out. So we're gonna keep it at 4 for right now, but temporal smoothing is one of the most important ones. What it's gonna do is use an algorithm to smooth out the edges and be even less pixelated. So if we enable it, we're gonna see that it makes a little bit of difference right here, but we're gonna see the majority of the difference in your standing still shots. Maybe we could change the cleaning radius a little bit higher, maybe to like 5. The rest of it you can adjust if you want, but I'm gonna leave it default, and I'm gonna collapse edge cleaner, then go to my outside mask. So for outside mask, I'm gonna drop that down, I'm gonna turn this on. We have either crop or mocha mask. So with crop, it's just gonna be a basic square. You're gonna choose where you want it to be at the top left and where the point is at the bottom right, and everything outside of that square is going to be masked out. But we're gonna use mocha mask because when you have Primatte Studio, it comes with a complete version of mocha built in, specifically geared for Primatte. So I'm gonna select it, and then we're gonna hit launch mocha. And that brings up Mocha Continuum. So I'm gonna drag my cursor over here to the right to where I finally see my subject. And this is the very first frame. If you wanna zoom out, you can hold shift and press plus and minus. So I'm gonna do shift minus, 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 minus. And there we go. So with Mocha, I'm not an expert in Mocha Pro, but I do know the basics. And what we're gonna do is draw a mask around this and mask out everything around it. So what I'm gonna do is take my spline tool and then left click and start drawing. And I wanna get really close to the edge right here and go all the way around my green screen because I move my arms a lot and I don't want those to get cut off with this mask. Once you're done with your mask, if you right click, it stops your point selection, and whatever you selected on the inside of this mask will be masked out. So that means I'm gonna be masked out. But the cool option is I'm gonna save this, and then I'm going to close this, and there I go. If we go over here to the left-hand side where outside mask, we see invert outside and mask, and we can check that box. And then I'm back and everything around me is gone. You can feather it if you wanted, but we don't need to do that at all. We drew a pretty good mask, so I'm gonna go ahead and collapse this. Next is the inside mask. Same concept as outside mask. If we select this drop down, the only option we have is mocha mask, because normally if you're gonna mask something inside, it's probably gonna be some sort of specific reason why, and it's most likely gonna be a movement involved. And so we wanna use mocha mask, and we're gonna go ahead and launch mocha again. Go ahead and find our starting frame. I'm gonna take my X-spline tool, and what I'm gonna do is draw around this, because I wanna mask this and keep it from getting affected by any of the chroma keying going on. And now that I've completed drawing it, I'm moving a lot in this shot. So I'll want to track this, and we can do that inside Mocha, simply by going over to the left-hand side and hitting the forward track button. And what it's going to do is analyze every single frame and track this specific thing that I've selected. It wanted to continue tracking after the shot ended, so I went ahead and stopped it manually. But now that it's tracked, I'm going to go ahead and hit save, top left, and then close it at the top right. And then now it is back, but it's gray. Why is that? Well, that's because of the secondary spill remover. So if I disable that, we now have my green pickle right here, totally fine and not affected at all. But the downside is we're removing that magic spill remover that's getting rid of all that excess green to make it look more natural. So I'm gonna enable secondary spill remover, drop it down, and then I'm gonna change the amount a little bit down to where the green comes back on my shirt, but it's not coming back too much on the blur over here. So maybe somewhere around like 30 right there. Then I still got some green, and we still have a lot of that green removed on my motion blur. So now I'm gonna collapse secondary spill remover, and then I'm gonna collapse inside mask. And I'm gonna go back to the beginning right here. And now we could use a little bit of color correction. I'm gonna drop that down and enable it. And because this scene, it looks like more like it's outside and smoke going on, I'm going to increase the temperature a little bit, maybe to like 30 or something like that. Give me a little bit of sunlight. And then I'm also gonna increase the tint to give me a little bit of redness because it looks like a red background. I don't wanna go too high with the tint, maybe just simply 5 or something like that, just a little bit. We don't have to go too much. We can maybe even increase the contrast a little bit if we wanted, but not too much, maybe like 3. Something simple. We don't have too many detailed color correction options, so I'm just gonna leave this as it is right here. And then I'm gonna collapse color correction. And now we're going down to light wrap edge. I'm gonna enable it by checking that box, and then I'm gonna drop it down. And then I'm going to, instead of choose background layer, I'm actually gonna show you what it does by using a solid color, and we're gonna use something very obvious. How about this teal right here? So what light wrap edge does, as you can see, it's making light of the color or the background layer wrap around your subject. So you can change the different things about it, like the lightness of it. You can make it be brighter or darker. You can change the width to go very far into your subject or not. And you can choose a lot of different blend modes, a lot of different options for a lot of different scenarios. You could even go down here and mix it with the original if you wanted. Blend it in from 0 to 100% opacity. So now that you know what it does, that's the whole reason we added Primatte Studio as a custom composite mode. So what we can do is select our background layer, and what it's gonna do is blend in the background layer and wrap that over the edge of our subject to really make it look like they're in this. You know, some of the light and everything's wrapped around their whole body and hair. I like to put my softness around maybe 20 or so. I typically like to keep my lightness at 0 right there even. I don't need to add any extra brightness or darkness to this. The width, I can change that a little bit. As you can see, the more we go with it, the more it's being wrapped around like my hair and ears. And so maybe the width can stick around, you know, maybe like 17.5. That looks pretty good. Apply mode, I like to do screen or lighten for the most part, but there are a couple of cool ones that can be useful, like add, darken, you know, multiply, things like that would really help. But screen looks pretty good to me. It's getting rid of a lot of the edge that makes it really look like this is a green screen. So that looks pretty good to me. So I'm gonna go ahead and collapse that and go down to light wrap spill, which is essentially the same thing, but at a broader spectrum across the entire subject. So I'm gonna enable that. And I'm gonna choose solid color, and we're gonna choose something very noticeable, maybe like, you know, green. How about that? Well, we just took away. We're gonna add some back. And so with this one, it's actually overlaying across the entire subject, not just the edge. So if I change lightness to 100 and go back down to 0, watch the shirt. It's just making some minute details to the brightness right there. And I could change this to lighten and then darken and go through all of these. And you're gonna see very small adjustments, but that's basically what it is. It's making very small adjustments, and that's what video editing is. You make very small adjustments, and those are what sells it. That's what sells the effect and the look for people. Small things. So I'm gonna change this back to background. I'm gonna choose color right here. And normally I'll choose like normal or something like that. So let's go ahead and see what color looks like. And now let's go ahead and see what normal looks like. Very little difference between that. So I'm gonna keep my lightness spill around maybe like 10 to 20, something like that. So once we're done with that minute detail, I'm gonna collapse it and then go down to edge, color correction, and we're gonna look at this. We don't have to do anything with this, but if we enable it, you can see that we can adjust different temperatures and colors for the edge and whatnot. If we wanted to blend it in even more, you know, like even right there, just the temperature of the edge, I'm making that really warm, you know, things like that. We could change the width of how far that's going over because we know I'm in a warm area. So now that's providing a warm, almost like a fill light around like this left-hand side. So it looks pretty good to me doing something like that. And I'm gonna collapse it. And again, we don't have to go through advanced because that's a bunch of the old school stuff that's more like the rudimentary keying that we don't need to do. So now I'm gonna collapse that and then finalize it. Remember I said I was gonna come back to matte refinement? I am gonna come back there, open it up, enable it, and then make some small adjustments. I like to soften the matte a little bit. If we soften it too much, it's blurring the edge, you know, away like that. I mean, that doesn't look good at all. So I'm gonna bring that down to maybe like something around maybe 2 or 3, something very small. We take it away. You can barely see a difference of what's going on, but that's okay. That's the point. So I'm gonna, maybe we'll make that like 4. There we go. And then we could shrink it if we wanted as well. But I'm not gonna shrink any of that because I've made some adjustments with the spills and that's gonna take away the adjustments I made. And so I think that looks pretty good right there. Maybe it's a little strong when it comes to the blending and blurring. Maybe let me break that back down to 2. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. And yeah, and so there we go. So if we play it out, so we can see the key looks pretty fantastic. I don't see anything wrong with it at this point. The motion blur is looking good. It's still keeping the green in my shirt. I mean, the edge is wrapped real nicely. It looks like I'm straight up in there with the smoke at this point. I mean, that's coming from, look at the comparison up here. So we're gonna go all the way to the top and we're gonna do the compare. We're gonna do side by side, final composite with the source. And there we go, coming from a multicolored background with uneven light, shadows casted, low quality, green on my shirt. I mean, that is a hard setup to key. And then we got it looking good right here. I mean, it looks fantastic, all done within this one super powerful plugin. You really can't do that with anything else. And that's what makes, I think, Primatte Studio the best Chroma Keying plugin I've ever used in my entire life. But that is going to wrap up this long video. I'm sorry it took so long. I just wanted to really explain everything for you. And so if it helped you out, be sure to shoot a like and subscribe at the bottom left there. And that'll really help me out. And I'll see you guys in the next video. And I want to give a special shout out to all my legendary scrappers at the top, LMC and Hardy Cash. You can find links to their channels and social media in the description below. And thanks to all my super scrappers there in the middle and my awesome scrappers at the bottom.